EX Ketone is right around the corner, and with her, if we follow JP tendencies, a lot of players will be using her to counter tanks, and she'll be in the meta for a while as a very viable Drainforce user. So today we'll discuss the Drainforce mechanic in detail. A lot of players don't know exactly how it works, and it's really hard to prepare for Drainforce if you don't understand the details of it. So we'll discuss how it works mechanically, how to build for it if you want to make use for it, how to build against it if you want to fight it. We'll validate these informations by going in game, and I'll actually show you how it works inside the game, and then we'll theory craft the most over-the-top Drainforce build that I can think of. So let's begin. So first of all, what is Drainforce? Well, it's a unique ability that only the soldier job has. What it does is it drains a percentage of your unit's max HP from the target, and since it's not a physical attack or a magical attack, it has really a bunch of mechanics that only apply to this specific attack. There are a couple characters that have it. In their sub-jobs, there's Eileen, Ketone, and Luarda with the soldier sub-job that can actually use this move. And then every single soldier main job in the game has it as well. So we're talking Oldoa, Stearns, Kuzelt, and Winter Ramada if you have her. So these are the characters we're talking about today. Drainforce is a typeless type of damage, which means it is not affected by resistances of any kind. And then it doesn't scale off attack, which means it's not physical, and it doesn't scale off magic, which means it's not magical. Because of that, it's going to ignore defense and spirit. Defense reduces damage from attack-based moves, and then spirit reduces damage from magic-based move. So you have a clear advantage here. And then barriers in War of the Vision affect either physical or magical or both, but there is no barrier that can affect damage that is not either of these types, which means it completely ignores barriers. Then, this move also ignores some counters. If you have something like Sword Guard, that's going to counter all damage taken. Well, that will apply to Drainforce. But some other counters, like Reflex, that affect specifically physical or magical damage, will be completely ignored by Drainforce. So if you want to know if your move is going to affect Drainforce or not, you should just take a look at the detail and see if it affects all types of damage, or specifically physical and magical. Unless it's all types of damage, it will not affect Drainforce. Now for the damage, even if you're not a pro in the War of the Vision damage formula, it's actually fairly simple. The modifier is based on your max HP. It begins at 37. Every point of killer, be it type killer or element killer, will apply and add a percentage of your max HP. And so right now, I'm mainly focusing this video on PvP, so Maneater will increase your damage against other humans. And then if you're a Oldoa draining an ice unit and you have some ice killer, well, you're going to drain more. And then, just like for every single source of damage in the game, the elemental advantage or disadvantage applies, which means if you're Oldoa and you're hitting an ice unit, well, you have a disadvantage, and you're going to lose 25% of your damage. But again, Oldoa draining an earth unit is going to have 25% extra damage. So that also applies to Drainforce. So if you want to build for a Drainforce build, there are two things you need to keep into account. First of all, your HP. Since you're going to be draining a percentage of your maximum HP, you want the highest total amount of HP possible. There is a couple ways to increase max HP. The Golem VC is one of them. The Fenrir VC on the Drainforce unit will give another 10% HP. There's been the earrings lately that do that, but only for a couple turns, so I don't know how reliable that'll be. Otherwise, there is Elde's TMR that increases max HP in an AoE, or the Paladin's Divine Grace ability that also increases HP. So there are a bunch of tools at your disposal for that. And then increasing your killers is the most important part. At its core, Drainforce drains only 37% of your max HP, and say you're moving in with a 7000 HP character, you're still not draining for a lot of damage. But if you have Odin equipped and you have 25 Maneater, well, suddenly, instead of draining a 37%, you're draining a 62% because Odin provides you with an extra 25 from the Maneater. And then if you manage to stack Maneater or Elemental Killer on top of it from other sources, that's when you can end up having a crazy damage, where a character drains for as much as their max HP or even more. Out of the examples we have on screen, there is the Rubius VC that provides Ice Killer. There is a ton of other VCs, especially in the MR categories, that provide some form of killer towards an element. So if you want to build for that, you should take a look at those cards. You probably have them maxed and never used them. The Exorcist card, specifically for Oldoa, gives her another 20% Man-Eater, which is really good. In terms of Esper, Bahamut and Odin have 25 Man-Eater. And you might be thinking, I don't want to equip Bahamut on a physical attacker. Sure, but you don't care if it's for Drainforce. You only care about your max HP and the killer. So sure, your other moves will be weaker, but Drainforce itself benefits from Bahamut quite a bit. Golem is a great option, lots of HP and 15 Man-Eater. And then the Venera's TMR, if you're fighting a light team, will give you Light Eater 25 for a couple turns, which significantly increases your Drainforce damage. Now, if you're on the other side of the battlefield and you're going to fight a Drainforce user, there are a couple things you can use to your advantage. First of all, and that's not on screen, Drainforce only has a range of 3, and it only has a height range of 0, which means if you're in a different elevation from the Drainforce user, they can't hit you, and if you're staying far away, it's really hard for them to catch you. Most Drainforce units have low mobility and low survivability, which means the chances are they will not even reach your team and use it. I keep naming Oldoa because she's the one I've used, but she's honestly not a great Drainforce user. She dies too quickly. Ketone will be meta-defining for Drainforce because she has good survivability, good mobility, and then can use it. So that's the reason why she's viable with it. If you want to fight them, single target resistance is your best bet. The Odin VC will give you 20%. There's a Stern's TMR, Ruin Stern's TMR I mean, that can provide you with some extra single target resistance. The Pod equipment, if you were there during the Nier collaboration, is a great option. Or the Platinum Armor if you're farming it. If you get into the pluses, you start getting some single target resistance as well. So these are all great tools to reduce Drainforce damage on your team. Then, healing down. It will not reduce the damage Drainforce does, but it does reduce the amount of healing these units get. And what makes a Drainforce unit really tricky is the fact that when they're in your face and they keep spamming Drainforce, they keep healing for all the damage they do, so it's actually really hard to take them down. But if you reduce how much healing they get, they become mediocre single target DPS units, so it's a good way to make sure they eventually die against what you're doing. Alright, so let's go in game. I'll be demonstrating using Oldoa. No, she is not the best Drainforce unit because she's not survivable and doesn't have mobility, but I don't have any EX Ketone, she's not even out when I'm recording this. So she's the one we'll be showing this. And she has the highest Drainforce damage that I can build because of the Exorcist card, which provides her with an extra 20% Man-Eater. So overall, with Odin and Exorcist, and then the base 37%. She has a 82% mod in her Drainforce, so she'll be draining 82% of her max HP on those enemy units. And then when we activate False Veil of Darkness, we'll drain even more on Elsirel, so that's what we'll be demonstrating. I am running the Titan VC. That will not increase Drainforce damage because it only gives Man-Eater for physical attacks, and as we said, Drainforce is not a physical attack. And then you'll see that the damage on Nasha will be slightly reduced because she's an ice unit, but it won't care about the defense and spirit, so it will still be decent damage. Enough said, let's go in and I'll show you all these things. So here we are, let's demonstrate a little bit of what we've been saying. First of all, let's see the damage from Drainforce without any modifiers. So right now, Oldoa should do 82% of her max HP with Drainforce. There we go, 4500, that's exactly it. If we were to target somebody like Ketone with the element advantage, we're going to do 25% more. And here we go, that's just from the element difference. If I were to target another lightning unit, for example, just to make sure, I have the exact same damage on these two, and again, against an earth unit, the exact same damage here. If I were to target an ice unit with an element disadvantage, see, only 3400. So here goes the difference here. So let's wait for now, and that'll be it. Now, as we know, Drainforce gives you as much HP as the damage that it does. So we're going to use Maning Slash to show the efficacy of healing power down onto a unit that uses Drainforce. Frederica has nothing to do in there. But with Nasha, we'll give her some single target resistance now to see how that changes the damage we do. So Divine Veil is cast, she now has some single target resistance on top. And then what Ketone will do is she'll use Knight's Blessing, giving a barrier to those characters, so we can see if that changes anything. Knight's Blessing, there we go, they now have a 35% barrier on top. Now, let's see what's going to happen with Drainforce. Still the same damage on Ketone, so we're completely ignoring the 35% barrier. If you check on War of the Vision Calc, it says reduces all damage by a certain amount. That is not true. It's all damage except from Drainforce damage. But if we look at Ketone, we used to do 3400 to her. Let's see what it looks like now. See, 2700, so the single target resistance does apply. And then we don't heal by 2700 if we're to do this move. We actually heal by a lot less because of the healing reduction down from LCRL. See, we only healed for 1600. So there goes that demonstration. Now there's one last thing to demonstrate, and it is Venera's TMR, because that's just a fun thing to show. So we're going to use the False Veil of Darkness. Before that, let's show you the damage we currently do on LCRL, and that is 4500. So we're next to her now, we'll use the False Veil of Darkness, and we'll see how much that moves my damage up. Now keep in mind, my False Veil of Darkness is only level 10, it is not maxed out, so the actual difference if you were to have the piece of equipment maxed would be a lot higher. But in my scenario with a level 10 equipment, I now drain for 5600. Again, that'll be reduced by the Maiming Slash that I was hit with, but it's still pretty good damage. So that's it for the in-game view. We can ignore barriers, single target resistance affects us, and then element advantage and disadvantage also applies. Now, let's finish this with as much Drainforce damage as I could figure out. And for this, we need a couple things. First of all, we're using Oldoa because, as I said earlier, she's the only one that can use the extra Man-Eater from the Exorcist vision card. We're going to use the Odin Esper. It would be the same kind of damage if we were using Bahamut. We're going to be using EX Zazan because he has March of the Juggernaut, and that is an ability that increases Man-Eater by 20% for all units around him, so it's another way to boost Drainforce damage. And then finally, we're going to use the False Veil of Darkness, so we're going to be targeting a light unit. If I wanted to target other elements, I could. I would just use another party vision card that increases Ice Eater, Fire Eater. There's a bunch of options. You should take a look at those. But here we go. With all that counted, we can have a total MUD of 127%. And then using the build that I've put in small down there. And the third party member is to be. So we have another master ability that increases win character HP, bringing us to a total amount of HP of 7,132. Now, adding up the modifier of 1.27, that's actually over 9,000 damage to a target Yuna or other light unit, which is crazy. Is that realistic in the context of the game? No, not really. You will not be dedicating your build entirely to Drainforce because the rest of your team just won't do much if you do that. But I have regularly used 4.6k Drainforce on tanks, and it has worked pretty well, so it is still a very powerful move. Just not necessarily as high as this. So that was it, guys. Hopefully it was interesting, allowed you to understand exactly how that ability works. So if you fight a bunch of enemy Ketones, you'll know what you're going into now. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. And then as always, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.